What if I could share with you the worst day of my professional life, without fear or judgment or ridicule, without loss of respect? Could we learn together from my experience?
Case Matters, a podcast series created for Australian dental practitioners, intends to do just that. To create a shared experience where all points of view are explored to help empower safer practice. Hello, my name's Dr. Annalene Weston, dental legal consultant at Dental Protection, and I'm going to guide you through today's case entitled, I'll Make Sure Everybody Knows. This was a case of attempted trial by social media, with the general populace invited by the poster to be the judge, jury, and executioner. How did we get here? And is this a fair process for all, or for anyone really? There are some conflicting views and opinions in this matter, but which view is correct? All of them, or just some of them? And is there such a thing as the right point of view in this at all, or could it perhaps be that everyone's a little bit right and a little bit wrong? We'll hear from the people involved and also look at the final outcome to see which lessons can be learned. I think we should start by hearing from Dr. Vector.
We've recently opened our first practice. It's been quite hard as we're new to the area, and I've moved closer to my brother who's been having a bit of a hard time. I'm really happy with the premises, and I've managed to recruit some really great staff who are helping me build the business. But it's been a hard slog, that's for sure. To try and keep my overheads down in the early days, my wife has been managing the practice and working on reception. It's a bit of a far cry from her regular job as an engineer, but she seems to be enjoying the break from the stresses of her usual trade and coping quite well as we can be anyway, with 3 young children at school and daycare. We've got our hands full.
The start of a business comes with many challenges, and Dr. Vector is not carrying these alone, it would seem, with her partner, Ms. Page, working alongside her. Let's hear from her.
I am so proud of Kate and all she has achieved. She's amazing. I'm absolutely here to support her, and we have loads of ideas about how we can make the business stand out, make it really special. We want to provide the patients with everything they want and need, and maybe increase their expectations about what can be achieved through comprehensive education using all of the available modern technology. We are a future-facing business, that's for sure.
While Dr. Vector and Ms. Page wanted to grow their business, they also wanted to grow it in the direction they were hoping to sustain. Dr. Vector was hoping to build a family-orientated practice that offered a broad range of general dentistry, and then, as the business grew, begin to offer extended services for her patients. She was already undertaking additional training in implantology, which added to her heavy workload, but she felt it was the right thing to do.
I know it might seem a bit mad to be doing so much at once, especially with 3 little ones, but I feel like now is a good time as any. Once it's done, it's done.
Dr. Vector had a recent graduate associate and an older practitioner working alongside her, both working part-time and sharing the second surgery, while she worked 5.5 days a week in the main surgery. The older practitioner, Dr. West, had previously owned a practice but had stepped away from that lifestyle and was transitioning into retirement. He was a good sounding board for Dr. Vector, often giving her advice, so let's meet him too.
Kate and Kieran are really good people, young and full of great ideas and optimism. It's wonderful that they actually want a family-focused practice in the first instance. Well, that's really how my wife and I operated when I set up and when we had small children. I do think, however, that Kate and Kieran are a little naive about a few things, and really they need to learn to walk before they can run. But they're young still, and will learn from experience, I'm sure. One thing I don't like, though, is all their radio ads and the silly videos they put on social media. It all feels quite facile to me. But of course, I am of the generation whereby we had to have a plaque within permissible dimensions. So, yes, I'm a dinosaur of the profession, I guess. But still, I'm not sure that this TikTok gramming is going to get them what they need. And I'm not sure at all what the dental board will think about it either.
As Dr. West has pertained to, there have been a lot of changes in how dental practitioners can advertise themselves, and it's prudent for listeners to review the Dental Board guidance on advertising and the proposed advertising for cosmetic procedures, which may well have been enacted by the time you're listening to this. and also, of course, the code of conduct to ensure that you are not inadvertently breaching the regulations that are in place.
Roger West is such a help to me, he really is, and I find his advice is on the money almost all of the time. I do feel, however, that he's fallen into the same category as my parents regarding social media, fearing something he doesn't quite understand. He doesn't need to worry because I've reviewed all the relevant dental board guidance and have made sure we're compliant.
While Dr. Vector's social media posts were indeed compliant, remember the perils of social media are not grounded solely in what we post, but also what others post about us. Mr. Lightfoot was looking for a new dentist and he had quite specific views on what he was seeking.
I'm looking to change practice due to the incessant upselling at the previous place. Every time I went in, they wanted to give me crowns and would put me on a payment plan, but couldn't explain the reason why. So there was no way I was going to have that done. It just felt like an attempt to separate me from my wallet. All I want is a quick check and clean. I know that's all I need. It's all I've ever needed. Because despite all the doomsaying, I don't seem to have lost my teeth as a consequence of them not being crowned. I've heard some impressive advertising on my local radio and the female dentist sounded very nice. I looked at their webpage and they seemed to have a focus on health, not trying to upsell me. Looking at her reviews, she seems like a healer, not a dealer and a stealer. And they offer gap-free checks and cleans, which is really appealing. It's about time my health fund gave me something back for all that I put into them. So I'm going to give this Vector Dental a go and see what I think.
Mr. Lightfoot rang up and made an appointment with Ms. Page, requesting a checkup and clean, declining to see the hygienist when offered.
I offered Mr. Lightfoot the standard premium comprehensive new patient package of an hour with Kate and an hour with Nathan, our hygienist, to get him started. But he didn't want to see Nathan. So I have made a 90-minute appointment with just Kate. As while that's not ideal, she needs time to do everything well, as by the time she has undertaken all of the charting, teeth and gums, taken the photos, reviewed the x-rays, tested his saliva, and all the rest of it, she needs some time to do the clean too. We want to get people through the door so Kate can convert them to long-term patients.
Do you think this is the appointment Mr. Lightfoot is wanting or expecting? Do you think perhaps he could have been clearer about what he wanted with Ms. Page, or that Ms. Page ought to have asked more questions? Do you believe that every new patient needs a long patient consultation appointment? Do you think Vector Dental should be advertising gap-free checks and cleans if they're not applicable every time? And what do you think is going to happen next? The day of Mr. Lightfoot's checkup arrived and he attended 10 minutes early as requested to complete his paperwork.
An iPad. They gave me an iPad to fill out my forms. While that's all very impressive, it also feels a bit flashy to me. It all feels a bit too flashy, to be honest, with the flat screen TV, expensive looking chairs. Even the fresh flower arrangement on the desks feels like a luxury item. I hope they haven't jacked up their fees to cover this. Oh well, it's my health fund's issue if they have, as I'm here gap-free anyway.
Mr. Lightfoot did not ask about the fees. However, on return of the iPad to reception, Ms. Page began to explain to him the costs of the day and offered to run a high-caps estimate for him regarding the new patient package codes so he could see his prospective costs. Mr. Lightfoot declined as he believed he was having a gap-free check and clean, just as he believed had been offered on the radio. Dr. Vector invited Mr. Lightfoot into the surgery and proceeded to undertake a comprehensive examination.
Mr. Lightfoot presents as a previous regular attender with a reasonably uncomplicated medical history. Just a few bits and pieces for blood pressure and cholesterol and metformin for his type 2 diabetes. Extraorally, his TMJ was unremarkable. Intraorally, however, is a slightly different story. Mr. Lightfoot has a series of old amalgam fillings with cracks running through them. Some of his teeth have been restored with composites, but they're stained, worn, and looking quite shabby. I suspect that Mr. Lightfoot clenches, perhaps even bruxes. From the appearance of his teeth, he is a ticking time bomb, and I think it's only a matter of time before he starts cracking cusp off, or perhaps even unfavourably cracking teeth. His gums are okay, but not great, with clinical attachment loss of at least 3 millimetres on all his teeth. The good news is that the OPG was clear of pathology, and I've been caught out before with a patient who had a row of old amalgams that had no pathology on bite wings, but periapical areas on 3 teeth that I didn't pick up until I took an OPG. Mindful of this experience, I vitality tested all of Mr. Lightfoot's heavily restored teeth, and all responded. However, looking at him today, I believe action needs to be taken soon to protect his teeth. Some of those cracked cusps are different colour to the rest of his teeth, and from my experience, that indicates they're going to shear off very soon. The bite wings indicate the absence of caries, which is great. However, I really feel we need to plan for some indirect restorations and a splint, plus a 6-point chart and perio treatment with our OHT Nathan, followed by a robust maintenance program. My provisional treatment plan is full perio assessment, followed by treatment and maintenance with Nathan. Remove old amalgams and transition to posterior crowns where appropriate on the 4s, 5s, 6s and 7s, starting with the teeth exhibiting the most cracking and wear. Ideally, I would do the crowns in quadrants, or at a minimum on opposing teeth, but I suspect the probable lack of contribution from Mr. Lightfoot's health fund will be a barrier for him, as it is for most patients, so I'll need to be mindful of that. And of course, I'll need to protect everything with a splint. I do wonder if I ought to send him for a sleep study too, to be sure there isn't anything else going on in that regard.
Dr. Vector took a series of intraoral photos to document the extent of the cracking and so she could visually demonstrate the issues to Mr. Lightfoot. She collected a series of ADA pamphlets on cracked tooth syndrome, perio and crown and bridge work to help support her conversation with him and printed off a provisional treatment plan. Using the images, she went through her plan, tooth by tooth and line by line. Mr. Lightfoot said nothing.
I wonder if Mr. Lightfoot is feeling a bit overwhelmed, as he's not engaging in this discussion at all. I decided the best thing to do was offer to see him again for a second consultation, once he had some time to digest everything. I also offered him a second opinion with Dr. West, or a provider of his choice. I also offered to run a HICAPS estimate for him and recommended that he approach his health fund regarding his major dental cover so he can understand his benefits and if this is going to be something he needs to consider in his plan. We do offer access to a third-party payment plan, but I noticed that Mr. Lightfoot's cheek twitched when I mentioned that, so I don't think that offer was well received. Best to let him reflect on this, I think, although I did caution him that at least 2 teeth were on the verge of breaking. There was so much to discuss that we ran well over time, into our lunch break in fact. I didn't want to not provide all of the relevant information, and it won't do me any harm to skip a meal. I'll just have a quick coffee.
How are you feeling about this interaction? Do you think Dr. Vector is reasonable to plan for the future, or do you feel she's upselling? Knowing how Mr. Lightfoot felt when he walked in, do you think he will be confident in Dr. Vector or cynical of her? What could or should Dr. Vector have done differently, and what do you think is going to happen next? When Mr. Lightfoot went out to reception, he was asked to settle his invoice. With the comprehensive examination, bite wings, OPG, vitality testing and codes for the photographs, his gap payment was greater than $100. Mr. Lightfoot said nothing. Well, we've heard from Dr. Vector. I think it's time we hear from Mr. Lightfoot, don't you?
Outrageous. This is simply outrageous. What kind of an idiot do they think I am? You cannot pass the costs of all of your bells and whistles and toys onto me as the patient. That woman literally sat me in the chair, pummeling me with the facts, waiting for me to relent. Well, I wasn't having any of it. Push as she may, I'm not being bullied into treatment I don't need through a combination of scare tactics and technology. And as for a payment plan, I'm signing up for nothing. They'll be offering to help me release money from my super next. What a rort. I'm never going back. I am, however, going to report them to my health fund, and there are more numbers on my HICAPS receipt than I've ever seen in my life. And then they charged me a gap too. This is extortion, and I'm sure it cannot be legal. Maybe practices overcharging such as this are the reason that mine and so many other people's health fund premiums are so high. I'm going to give the health fund a call to report them about their dodgy practices, as I'm sure they require investigation. They should take care of it and protect innocent parties like me from being ripped off in the future.
In accordance with the practice policy, Ms. Page called Mr. Lightfoot to inquire whether he'd like to book. Mr. Lightfoot did not pick up, so Ms. Page left 2 voicemails inviting him to return. Although sensitised by his experience at the practice, Mr. Lightfoot felt satisfied that reporting his concerns about their billing to the health fund was sufficient and intended to waste no more time than that thinking of them. He intended to book into a no-gap clinic for his clean and just have done with it. That was until, however, he lost the cusp from his 3-5. Quickly, a second cusp was lost, this time from his 1-4.
This cannot be a coincidence. That woman tapped and pressed and prodded and created a problem so I would have issues so that she could validate her pricey treatment. She did this to me. I know it. And I will not stand for it, and I'll make sure everybody knows too.
Mr. Lightfoot, working in IT, had been an early adopter of social media. He was a blogger and also a frequent reviewer of product and services under his pseudonym, Lights the Way. Consequently, he had profiles on many reviewing platforms. On this occasion, Mr. Lightfoot started by posting a Google review as follows.
Vector Dental, more like Victor Dontal. Overpriced and flashy, these charlatans attempt to suck you in through the creation of a false narrative of need, first running through your health fund card to see what you're worth to enable them to plan enough treatment to suck your insurance benefits and sign you up for indefinite payment plans beyond your means. Lengthy appointments designed to exhaust your resistance to their seductive sales tactics, coupled with endorphin-stimulating gimmicks, form the basis of their strategy of fear tactics and coercion. And if you fail to comply, expect repeated phone calls intending to further engender fear. As if this alone was not enough, the smiling assassin, the principal dentist, undermined several of my teeth, causing them to break. Just as the scare tactic calls ended, created the need for me to run back and beg to be ripped off. Well, not this customer. Consider yourself reported to the health fund for your fraudulent and amoral billing practices and called out for your bad behaviour. 0 stars. If I could give less, I would give less.
Have you ever checked the reviews on a place or a product online before you purchased or went there? Perhaps a new dishwasher when you were checking brands, or a restaurant when you were out of town and seeking a recommendation. How much weight did you place on the reviews? Did they help you make a decision? Critically, do you think the business of healthcare occupies the same consumer space as fridges and restaurants, or are we something other than a good or service? We at Dental Protection believe that we are different to other consumables as we are in the business of trust. Trust is hard to build. It cannot be sold, only developed. Regardless, as we are people of integrity, online reviews, such as the one penned by Mr. Lightfoot, are incredibly hurtful. We feel that they've called our honesty into question, and we feel so very wronged. And remember that oftentimes the patients who hurt us the most are the ones that we have invested significant time and effort in. Ms. Page found the online review first.
I cannot believe this pig of a man. The things that he says, surely this is defamation. It's totally unfounded. And to criticise Kate like this, she told him his teeth could break and showed him multiple images. How can he even suggest she undermined his teeth? What a wicked thing to say. And then the allegations of fraud and extortion. We're a young business. We're not going to be able to survive a review like this. I can't believe this has happened. I'm going to have to tell Kate. She'll be devastated.
Ms. Page and Dr. Vector were talking through the online review and how best to respond when Dr. West arrived, and they asked him for his opinion.
Kieran and Kate were devastated, and understandably so. But I said then that they needed to slow down, think before they react, and pick their battles. You know, nobody ever won a fight with a patient, ever, and particularly not online. They need to call their indemnifier and talk the matter through, for they will know what to do. I also told them not to take it personally. There will always be people you can't please, no matter how hard you try. And they need to understand what they are trying to achieve with their practice image. It may well be off-putting to some patients, but that's okay. They can't get upset every time a patient doesn't like them. As business owners, they need to be more robust, I believe.
Sage advice from Dr. West indeed. Dr. Vector called Dental Protection as Dr. West recommended and spoke with Kristen, one of our case managers, who provided the following advice.
Dr. Vector called to query what could be done in the event of a negative Google review. I could tell she was very upset and encouraged her to talk me through the events. Having seen the review, I can completely understand why she was so troubled. Starting at the end, I was ultimately able to provide Dr. Vector with a resource on how to manage online reviews, as there is more than one option available. To summarise, you can ignore them, knowing that one bad review is not the end of the world. And with time, all of the good ones will ultimately bury it, putting it in the place it deserves. You can provide a generic response, inviting the patient back in to discuss their concerns, while ensuring that you don't breach their privacy by including any of the clinical details. Not only does this on occasion bring the patient back to the table, but critically, it signposts to any potential future patients that you do take their concerns seriously. And by doing this, it diminishes the potential damage caused by a negative review. There's also ways to have an online review removed, and these are set out in the resource. But so moving back to the start of our conversation, it was important that Dr. Vector had the opportunity to express how she felt. And we explored why Mr. Lightfoot might have felt the need to behave in this way. I offered her access to the confidential counselling service and ensured that she was across all of the relevant advertising guidance, which she was, and also the guidance surrounding health fund codes, as it appeared that Mr. Lightfoot may have also made a notification to them.
Dr. Vector and Ms. Page considered the advice and decided to post a generic response intended to signpost to other potential patients that they listened to the concerns. Kristen reviewed their wording to help them to be confident they were not making things worse. Somewhat surprisingly, this online response prompted a call from Mr. Lightfoot, who was incredibly grateful for the opportunity to express his concerns in person. He did this crankily and with little grace, but Ms. Page gritted her teeth throughout and let Mr. Lightfoot get it all off his chest. Pleasingly, following this conversation, the review was removed immediately, though he did not return for the planned treatment. Lights the Way also did not post about the practice again. The practice continued to grow, and as Kristen predicted, the positive online reviews steadily appeared.
That was a horrible few days. I was really worried. I've tried to reflect on this and think about anything I could have done different for Mr. Lightfoot, but I can't really put my finger on anything. We just really weren't a good fit for each other. He didn't need to be so mean, though. I've had enough worry about this. I'm so glad I've had those resources about online reviews now. They've been really helpful for the good ones as well as the bad ones. I guess it's all part of running a modern day business. And Roger West is right. I can't get upset every time I'm not a good fit for a patient. I need to focus on those we can help and who want our service and accept that we'll never be the perfect fit for everyone.
A good approach to the practice at large. Thank you, Dr. Vector, and thank you all for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed listening to this edition of Case Matters. The cases discussed in Case Matters are presented as an educational aid to dental protection members and to act as a risk management tool. They're based on issues arising in dental protection cases in Australia, and some facts have been altered to preserve confidentiality. If you like dental protection podcasts and you'd like to hear more, please subscribe and leave a review.